and I think responded effectively to changing realities. I don't know of any classics department that starting late 60s, often in the 70s, didn't begin to include more routinely in their curriculum classical mythology, women in antiquity, film, obviously expanding offerings in archaeology, Greek and Roman public and private life, which really reached out to a larger audience of students. On almost every campus I know that has a classics major, there are multiple options. There are the option with the heavy-duty philology, steeped in Greek and Latin language, but then there's even majors that require no language, or if you will, philology light. That's L-I-T-E, of course. Years ago, when I was in college, I wanted to take a year-long survey of Greek literature with my beloved teacher, Bill McCullough. He wouldn't let me. He said, you should be reading this in Greek. Now, I'm still kind of mad at him, because I'm sure I would have learned a lot in that course, but I suspect that even Bill, if he were teaching today, wouldn't come to that conclusion. You know, there's also that interesting example at the PhD level where Columbia, maybe it's 10 or 12 years ago now, actually offers a PhD, not in classics as we usually mean it, but classical studies. And only one language, for example, is required, and you do more in Greek and Latin culture. I would also suggest that compared to our fellow programs in the humanities, we have served ourselves better by that nimbleness. One might argue that we were faced with, what is it that concentrates the mind so well? Death earlier. But if you look at programs in German and Russian, they came to this much later. The Cold War kept them fueled to around 1990. And they haven't come up with that range of courses, and I think in some ways they are in worse shape than we are. Another critical question is, who's our audience? The vast majority of classics majors are not going to enter the profession of classics. And that's as it should be. There is simply not the need for the number of students that we want who are interested in our subject. We shouldn't lament this. This is true in most fields. Most students, and I give them a hard time sometimes, a student undergrad will say to me, I have a degree in economics. I have a degree in English. And I will say, no, you don't. You majored in economics. You majored in English, and that was around a third of your course of study. Now, because of the inherent excitement of what we have, and that special place in the history of the West, classics continues to be, in many ways, robust. Now, as someone who spends more time than is healthy looking at enrollment patterns, one of the things that you will note, when people lament the crisis in the humanities, the death of the humanities, what they're typically looking at is the number of majors, the number of students who have chosen that as their first area of study. But if you look at what students want to do, if you look at when they vote with their feet, and you look at just enrollments, classics does pretty darn well. And actually, the humanities do much better than what one would suppose if you looked only at the number of majors. And you can see that really over the last 50 years. You know, we are in some ways, I think, like a physics department. You don't get a lot of majors in physics. You get a lot of students. And that's for a variety of reasons, but again, back to the point I made earlier, and I think Shadi alluded to, for many, me verbs are as daunting as quantum mechanics. Okay, let me try to look at the future. And looking at the future is always kind of fun because you can't prove it wrong. Okay, so first let's acknowledge change will happen. We can try to anticipate it, embrace it, work with it. I think fighting against it is not a winning option. The forces of change currently at work, in which I touched upon above, are real, and they're not going to subside. We're not going to return to Tom Brown's mythical school days, the Yale of 1828, or even the Kenyon College of 1971. There will be ever new areas of study that will claim a place in the academy, and unless universities are going to grow at some exponential, or at least a geometric rate, we're simply not going to be able to accommodate everything. Second, how we adapt to the future, I think, makes all the difference in the world. This follows from my first point. What we're going to look like 20 years out, 30 years out, I don't want to predict. But think how well we've done joining in partnerships with other fields. The Perseus project was in the vanguard of the use of digital materials in the humanities. Look at what we have done working with the fields of anthropology, sociolinguistics, even neuroscience. Those partnerships, I think, will serve us very well. Classics is multidisciplinary by its nature. It is not really a discipline, it's an area study. That, I think, works to our advantage. In short, we play well with others, at least intellectually. Third, we need to connect. One vital role of a humanities center, although not its only role, is to expand the range of our impact. We must be successful ambassadors of the great cultural heritage of which we are the primary stewards. If we cannot communicate the basics and more of the Greco-Roman world to a broad audience, if we cannot excite them about Catullus, Greek sculpture, Roman history, and Greek mythology, if we cannot relate the past to the present, if we cannot, in short, make an implicit case for the value of the ancient world, we will suffer and fade. At the same time, we have to be true to our core, the value of what we offer. As I suggested earlier, I frequently rail, whenever I get a chance, against an instrumentalist view of education. The point of an education in a liberal arts tradition is not to prepare someone for a career, but for any career. It is to prepare young men and women to make a difference in the world. The intricacies of the Greek language, the subtle movements of a Horatian ode, the unsettling dialogues of Seneca, or the debate over empire in Thucydides all serve to sharpen thinking, expand the imagination, invite critique, and lead to a greater understanding of our humanness. And this understanding impressively instills the ability to engage effectively with the world. I entered classics a long time ago because I found the subject interesting and my teachers inspiring. Our subject remains fascinating and relevant. It is our responsibility and the responsibility of those who come into the profession after us to combine this powerful and interesting subject with an intensity and a moral voice that shows that it matters. If we do that, classics, like the humanities in general, will thrive. Thank you.